Howdy once again, it's tubalcain at your service. And in this video I'm going to talk about this LISLE drill grinder, and I recently acquired this through a trade with my buddy Keith. I traded him a drill press. Now you can go back and watch that video of the trade, and there's two versions of that. One is a real short ADD version, 4 minutes long, and then the other one, if you're interested, is a tour of his shop, a rather complete tour. It's a long video. The lighting isn't always good, but he's an amazing man with a tremendous collection of tractors and other farm collectibles, an interesting guy, even older than I am. So take a look at those videos. I'll show you the titles here in just a second. Okay, here are the titles of the two videos of the swap, so go ahead and check those out if you're in the mood. Just do a search for these. Maybe you've already seen them. Here's the drill grinder in as found condition. This is certainly an older model. I looked up on Google Images LISLE drill grinder, drill sharpener, and I found hundreds of pictures, and this is obviously an old one. The base is quite different. Notice that it uses a totally enclosed motor, which is a good thing, because I see the new ones have slots in them, and you know, the grinding dust is going right through them. I don't know why they do that. I did have one of these at the high school many years ago. I probably ordered it 45 years ago, and it was difficult for the kids to use, so it didn't get a lot of use, and I guess it was sold in the auction. It did have a wheel guard on it, but this mechanism appeared to be identical. Now Keith said that this was a brand new wheel, but it sure is dirty. He never did use this. I think he was afraid of it and just not interested in it. So he never did use it, probably had it for 15 years ago. He bought the wheel, and he bought this brand new wheel dresser, which never has been used. There's the diamond, and I think those are about $40. And the wheel is $15. I'll show you the parts list here in just a second. I do not like this stand that it came on. It's heavy and clunky, and it's real low. I guess it was made for you to sit down on a stool, which if you're doing a lot of drill bits, I think you'd want to sit down. So maybe I won't throw it away, but I really don't like the stand at all. I'm going to take this off of the stand and take it down the basement to talk about the wheel guard. This whole video, although an introduction to the LISLE grinder, is really going to be devoted to making the wheel guard, which is missing. And getting back to those pictures, apparently those older models didn't come with a wheel guard, which is kind of shocking. But there also was no work light on here. I thought maybe there was a bracket and it was missing, so I don't think those parts were missing. I don't think they were ever on this machine. So this machine must be about 50 years old. I'm not totally sure, but I still see a lot of similarities to the new model. And I do think they stopped making this finally. After a long run, they probably saturated the market and people just buy new drill bits anyway, I think, especially in the small sizes. I don't like them for small sizes. I throw those bits away. They're great for 1/4 inch and up, maybe to 1 inch diameter. There will be a series of videos on this now, perhaps 8 or 10, including a complete restoration and painting and the guard, and then a demonstration on how to use it. Now, Adam Booth has already covered that pretty much and did a magnificent job, as he does in all his videos, in regards to showing how to use that, but I'm going to show you my slant on that, I believe, as well. I have hundreds of drill bits that I have not thrown away, and I was getting ready to throw away, both in here and downstairs and in coffee cans and other places, and all need reconditioning. I'll do some of them, but I have thousands of drill bits that are in perfect condition, so I'm a little hesitant to waste a whole lot of time. And I have umpteen sets of these as well, in complete sets, all from auctions, of course, and probably 6 or 8 or 10 of the number sets as well. That is neither here nor there. Keith apparently acquired this grinder in the year 2000, because that's the price list that he gave me. And he bought, I guess this is a more recent brochure, probably also 18 years old, but probably the current one. Now, I told you Lyle stopped selling these, making them, but they also had made one that was simply a rebranded Derex, and I did own a Derex. They are the best. This is actually kind of mediocre compared to a Derex. But the Derex rebranded was mounted on a Balder grinder, and from what I read, they made an initial run of them, 500 or whatever they make, and then apparently they did not sell, so they discontinued them. Apparently they would have been $1,500 or a couple $1,000s, and that just isn't going to sell. You know it isn't in quantities. But they must have sold tens of thousands of these in different versions over the years. So you can see here that there's the guard and the light, and not only a wheel guard with an end on it and a shield, so that is all missing or never was there. And you can see that this base here is a little bit different, and I intend to paint this hammer tone green, but this video is really essentially a pattern making video showing me making a wooden foundry pattern for a wheel guard, and it's going to be a long one, and it's no small job for you, and probably even a greater job for you to have to watch it. But that's what it should look like. And that's what Adams looks like. Now this is a nice brochure. There is complete instructions on the fundamentals of sharpening, on all of the geometry, and I'll talk about that later on. They tell you how to set this up, warning instructions, exactly how to use it, and then more of that. And then here is a parts list. Now, I question whether that was a 5-inch wheel that came with it, because that's what Keith had, a 5-inch wheel, and I thought, well, that seems like an odd sized wheel, so I asked Adam Booth, and he said, yes, 5 inches correct, because nowhere on this sheet or on the price sheet does it tell what the wheel size is. It just talks about a parts number. So on this parts list, you will recall that when I talked to Keith, he said that wheel cost 40 bucks. Well, it didn't. It cost, at that time, $15, but I think what he was referring to is that he paid 40 bucks for the diamond dresser that I showed you just a few minutes ago. But all of the parts are on here, and I understand, I contacted them. Some of these parts are still available, but not all of them. So I don't really know what is available. I hope I don't have to buy any parts, but possibly I will need some parts or for this assembly, but certainly not for the motor. I had to laugh when I picked this up because Keith said, here's the old wheel, you know, so there you can see Keith and people like him keep the old spark plugs, the old junk. They don't throw it away. They buy a new one and don't throw the old one away. Left-hand nut, of course. And that's the new wheel. Why it is that dirty and the blotter is all kind of wrinkled, but this was kept in an unheated building. But the reason I'm showing you this view is that there is absolutely, positively no provision here for a guard, and I don't understand that. That's why I'm thinking the guard is not missing. I'm thinking there never was a guard, because how would it have been held on there? Other than if it was held onto the base, and that doesn't appear the way it's done from looking at some of the archival pictures. So generally there is a part here, a hub that you can fasten it to, but there is no hub. This is the shaft coming right out of the motor, and it turns. By the way, this needs new bearings. Can you hear that? It's not going to get them, but if the bearings are bad, that tells you there's a lot of hours on this thing. But I plan on fastening the wheel guard from these studs. They're 1032 with some short adapters, and that is how I plan on fastening, and I hope that works out, because I'll be spending and wasting a lot of time if it isn't. Now, I like this motor, even though it's an old one, because it's capacitor start. It's got a beautiful built-in switch, and it's got the internal cooling fan, which is a big plus, so that the grinding dust doesn't get in there, but the bearings are ruined whether the dust got in there or not, but it's probably just due to a lot of hours on it, as I just said. So it's all going to come apart and get painted, including this assembly, but let's go on down the basement now, and I'm going to get started on the wheel guard, and that's going to be a wooden pattern, and I will talk about 3D patterns because this would be so easy with a 3D pattern, but I am going to laboriously produce a wooden pattern and from that an aluminum casting, and then have to mount it and then make a cover and a shield, and so there's just an awful lot of work. This will probably be more than one video for the guard alone. You can skip through it if you don't like the detail, because there will be a lot of detail, but yet I am going to try to speed it up, and I know that I've become verbose in my old age, and that's killing some of you, but there are some out there that absolutely love every tiny little detail, because wood pattern making is kind of a lost art. I don't pretend to be a pattern maker, but I do know something about it. I've made a lot of patterns, so this will be a flat back pattern. A split pattern probably would be better, but it's about twice the work. So let me take this off and go on down the basement and get started. And it's about time. All right, I'm down in the basement shop now. I had to drag this thing clear down here, and taking this part off and setting it aside for now. I'm talking, this is a woodworking video, and it'll be a long one. And I know I keep apologizing, although I've done nothing wrong, but the reason I say that, and I'm hesitant to become too long-winded, and I already am, the average viewing time on my videos, it sounds like I'm scolding you, but I'm not. The average viewing time is 6 or 7 minutes on a video, so if I make a 30-minute video, most people aren't watching it. That's why I sometimes think I'm wasting my time with the details, and because it takes, I would say, 10 times longer to do a project like this, taping it, than if I just went ahead and did it off camera all by my lonely self down here. But all right, so I guess that in itself was a little bit of a rant, but this whole thing will be taken apart and cleaned piece by piece and painted, but not part of this video. Remember, this is an 8-part video probably, but taking the, you think I'd learn, the wheel off, I want to talk about making the foundry pattern to make the wheel guard. That's what this is about. As usual, I do not start with a blueprint or a drawing. I start with a wooden model, and I must confess that I've already been working on this for a day or two, but that is neither here nor there. But here's the 5-inch wheel. Here is the mock-up. Now, this is not a pattern. This is a wooden mock-up. A pattern would be tapered. That is, would have pattern draft on it. I'll talk a lot more about that. So this is just a piece of scrap wood, several pieces glued together, and I'm showing you here different kinds of fillets, or I was practicing is what I was doing. There's leather and there's the wax. I probably won't do that. I burnt myself bad doing that, so now I'm discouraged on that. But we have an 1 3/4 hole here to fit around this flange here. Notice there's a hole in there for a spanner wrench, as there is here in the nut. But the whole idea here, and I removed part of this, but we have to have a chute for the grinding dust to get out of there and the sparks, so I broke some of that out on purpose. And then as far as this is concerned, I don't know what I need yet, so that will probably be done later on, and I'll saw the aluminum casting out rather than the pattern. This will fit over like that, and then let me put the wheel on there just real briefly to check for clearances. And there's just all kinds of things that I have to do here or be thinking about. And number one is, how am I going to fasten the guard onto the motor? Well, as I told you, I could make some kind of mount here and mount it directly onto the base, but I'm not going to do that. I am going to extend these bolts. These are long bolts that go all the way through the motor. I think you know that. And you can see this one isn't going to be of any use, so there'll be 3 of them, I guess, and a coupler nut up there that will fasten this in position. Also right here, remember there has to be a spark arrestor. I guess I'll call it a spark arrestor. That keeps the sparks from traveling clear around with the wheel. It kind of stops it. It'll be adjustable. And then also the face shield attached on to here. So all of those things have to be considered. Well, I went over to Menards and I bought a scrap piece of 2x8, so I guess that's probably fir, not pine. And I had to laugh. The way they have this, the way they sell this, they call it the value wood rather than scrap, because they were 2 and 3 feet pieces. But that's what I wanted. Otherwise, I brought a saw along thinking I'd have to saw it off to get it in the car. Also Baltic birch. I love to work with Baltic birch. That's always sold in the hobby section. Craft wood, but I love the smell of it. It smells like Tinker Toys, if you remember that. So that's fondly reminds me of my childhood. So what I'm doing here with this, and I'm one step ahead of you, there is another version, another model that I made. This is the spark chute. That's what it's actually going to look like. This has the taper. Can you see the taper? We call that pattern draft. That's 3 degrees, but I've reduced it to 2 degrees because the thickness here on the bottom is just so much greater than the top that I thought, well, that really you need 3 degrees to pull out of the sand, but I reduced it to 2 degrees. I'll talk more about that. And then this was all rough sawn at an angle on the Delta bandsaw, and then taken to the drum sander. And that's out in the garage, so I don't want that dust down here in my metalworking equipment, but that's how I put this angle on. Then, after I do the inside, it will be glued onto that Baltic birch, sawed out again on the outside, and I'm hoping I'm getting the dimensions right. See, that's what the worry, so I don't have to do it over again. And you can see I probably wasted, and I do mean wasted, a couple hours on this piece. Also, I was determining here how I was going to handle this internal radius here, which is always very awkward because the sand hates those. It won't pull out. And it's got to be smooth so it'll be so that it'll pull out. And you can see it has no strength at all, but once that's glued, I didn't mean for that to happen, but it doesn't matter. When it's glued to the Baltic birch, it'll have great strength. But boy, that broke right across the grain, didn't it? And you can see the growth rings. This tree is a 7-year-old tree. You know, we used to have, I've talked about growth rings before. Old growth wouldn't break like that. But you know, this is junk wood. All of our modern wood is junk wood, if you don't mind my saying, Mr. Menard. As if he's got anything to do with the growth of the trees. I just got back from the groundbreaking ceremony for the YMCA. They're adding a big addition on, mainly for exercise machinery, and my wife goes down there every day. And then I went down to the new dime store. They just opened a new dime store today. Yes, I said dime store, but actually it's a Dollar Tree, because dollar is only worth a dime. But they already had a Dollar Tree, but now they tripled it in size. So I went in there real briefly with no intentions of buying, but the thing is huge. Filled, of course, with inferior merchandise, but that's what we demand. The place was packed. Now, what I did on this piece here is there's 2 samples here. This is what 2 degrees looks like in a 1.5 inch distance. This is what 3 degrees looks like in that distance. And that's just for my own internal purposes, but I'm showing it to you anyway. Bear with me as I talk about protractors. I got this Starrett protractor, which I like, but I really prefer this type of Starrett protractor. Can you see the difference between the two? But yet these are both way too big and cloddy to use for my purposes. So in fact, I took these and made myself 2 little gauges. This one being 2 degrees, just aluminum. This one also 2 degrees. I made some 3 degrees and then I threw them away. But the purpose of these is, what is the purpose? But you can see here, this is 90 degrees. So I'll be using that as well as this, and I was well advised by myself, I guess, to make these. I also use well, I can use this protractor too. And I like these little squares. Now, can anyone tell, raise your hand if you can tell me the difference between these 2 squares. Yes, you. Shop Dog Sam in the front row there in your usual seat. You're right. This is a common little Starrett square, machinist square, but this one is a die maker square. Well, what's the difference? See this little set screw here? That allows you, after loosening this up, to set this blade at different angles. Most of you probably know, but Shop Dog Sam did know what that was. That's good, Sam. You get an A for the day. So those are some of the tools that I'm using. Okay, now a pattern maker uses special rulers, and let me explain the purpose here, and raise your hand if you know what these rulers are called or what they're used for or their purpose. But not you, Sam. Put your hand down. You already answered one. Give somebody else a chance. You there in the back row. Yes, you are right. Those are pattern maker shrink rules, and they come in all different flavors. For instance, this one is a shrink of 5/16 of an inch per foot. There's a 5/32, and so on. But the one that I'm going to use, and of course in the Starrett book it tells the shrinkage rates for different metals, and this particular one for aluminum is 3/16. We got a little corrosion going there. 3/16 per foot, and since I don't ever use any other metals, that's the one I'll be using. Why? Because if I make a wooden model, and it was, let's say this was 1 foot in diameter instead of the 6 inches that it truly is, it would end up being, after it came out and had been cast, it would be 3/16, what did I say? Yeah, 3/16 smaller than the original if it was 1 foot. Of course, this is only a half of that, so a pattern maker has to allow for that shrinkage. Now, is it that critical for something like this? Not really, but imagine how critical and important that would be for something like an engine block or a transmission case. But I'm going to go ahead and use that one anyway, as I really should. Now I want to stop and tell you something. I know this is dragging, but speed it up if you can't take it. Now I will put all of these away so I do not grab the wrong one. This is the one that I'm going to use. I just said that, but let me tell you a little story here about my wonderful dad, if I may digress. He did some pattern making, but in the basement he had rulers like this, and I recall making a project. I must have been 12 years old or whatever, and in the end, after I made it, it was all wrong. Everything about it was wrong. And then only 30 or 40 years later did I realize or discover that my dad had a shrink rule, and they were wooden shrink rules like this. And that was just among his regular tools there. So I had spoiled much work by using a shrink rule inadvertently. Now, a real pattern maker would not be using fir lumber from Menards. He'd be using sugar pine and the finest mahoganies and all those woods that I showed you in the Kent Collins book. But I'm a cheap son of a gun and I only need a small piece. And the thing is, I waste so much time on something like this because I'm only going to make one of them. That's the shame of spending days, and I do mean days, making... Oh, my hands are so wrinkled and horrible. I've seen better hands in a recent funeral that I went to, in a man in a casket that looked far better than these. Digressing again. But anyway, and this is not probably flat. That's not too bad. I did check some of them at Menards. Some of them had a cup in them, the likes of which I had never seen. No wonder it was among the value woods. I found the center here, and I center punched it. Now I have here two dividers that I've preset from previous work. And why am I scribing wood? You don't scribe wood. Only a madman would do that. Well, because earlier when I was doing one of these other ones, perhaps this one, well, later on I could no longer see the pencil marks, and I lamented that. So here what I'm doing is scribing these. So there's the inner wall and the outer wall, nice and deep, so that even if the graphite pencil marks are obliterated, I still will be able to read it. Then I'll go over with a regular compass and darken them. I'll do that off camera. Alright, it looks something like this. I darkened in the scribe marks. Also, I put the chute in place. And that's the spark chute, and that's pretty much arbitrary. I don't know if it's in the right location or not, but you can see a double wall there. And now, in fact, what I'm ready to do is to go over to the bandsaw, set it at 2 degrees, and saw the inside. Now, I have no intention of sawing the outside at this time. That'll be done after it's glued onto the Baltic birch. So are you following me at least somewhat in what I'm doing so far? So let's go over to the bandsaw. I'll just show you real briefly what I'm doing there. And that'll just be rough sawed, because in fact I intend to take it down to the line with the Ryobi oscillating drum sender. Thank you for watching my videos, and those of you that have been faithful to me, leave kind comments if you're in the mood. Hold the main ones if you would, please. They must have made a million of these Rockwell Delta 14 inchers. I already set the table at an angle with my little gauge rather than using the protractor that's underneath. 1/4 inch blade. No, you didn't hear me swear, but if I was a swearing man I would have. There was a crack in this wood. It literally fell apart. So what I have to do, I could start over with another piece of wood, but just to show you, I believe I'm going to glue this and clamp it and let it set for an hour, and then I'll continue with the project. So see you then. 2 things. Remind me to chew my wife out when she gets home, because there's no wax paper. Maybe they don't even make wax paper anymore, but I love wax paper so this wouldn't stick. So there was a roll of Reynolds crap, and it was almost near the end of the roll, and it's just all damaged here. So that's why I changed the name. So using a little of the ubiquitous, oh, little is right. Where am I going to put the excess? You don't need much, but that should glue up nice and strong, and I don't really need any strength. Anyway, where's that? Well, my hands are all, I better put some more on. The hole is huge in that Elmer's, because now I got glue everywhere. And then the whole idea here is that I was going to use a straight edge over here. And then a clamp. I don't want any glue. You know, glue has a lot of water in it. I don't want that parallel to get rusty. I think you can see why pattern making takes so much time, and I think I should be using more modern glues, perhaps epoxy or something like that, you know, that would speed this whole thing up. So, alright, I'll see you in an hour. Okay, it's several hours later, and I'm ready to take the glue off, you know, and my wife just got back from Walmart, and for once I had calmed down. I had good enough sense to keep your mouth shut, tubalcain, about the wax paper, so I said nothing. And I'll probably never need wax paper for the rest of my life anyway. But I'm mad at myself for chinsing. See, I got such a little narrow piece right here. No wonder it broke. I bought all kinds of wood. Now this one is, I don't really want to use treated, but that was like 79 cents, so I got it. But, you know, I bought this 2x8. Is that 2x10? And, you know, that's what I should be using right now if I could cut between the knots. But no, I had to chintz and then waste time because it cracked. And, you know, we know that's a weak point. Any woodworker knows that that's a weak point. But if I had started and left 1.5 inches, and I may still have to do that if that cracks again on me. While you were sleeping, I put a patch back here, a scab. That ought to hold it. while I saw, so it won't break again. So I glued there, and we got this on, and that, of course that's all waste stock anyway. So it's all for naught. It looks ugly, but it'll soon be gone. Now I'm ready to take that drum sander and sand the inside. So let's go out in the garage where I have the sander, but let me show you something else real quick just before we do. A pattern maker is considered the exalted craftsman, and this page appeared in all of the Kent Collins catalogs for many years. They are the leading supplier, or were the leading supplier of pattern making supplies. But take a minute to pause your video and read this. Now, I do not pretend to be the exalted craftsman, but I'm just your old YouTube shop teacher. But read this, and this is by Edward Leslie. And it just gives you a little indication of the skills that are involved in making wooden patterns. Pause your video.